The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Mrs. Carter stood in the nurse's office, her hands trembling so violently she had to grip the edge of the metal desk to steady herself. Tears streamed down her face, carving paths through her carefully applied makeup, and her breath came in short, desperate gasps. The school nurse, Linda, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, but Mrs. Carter couldn't stop shaking. She couldn't stop seeing what she'd just witnessed. The image was burned into her mind like a brand, searing and permanent. "How did I not see it?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "How did I miss this?" Linda squeezed her shoulder but said nothing. What could anyone say? The answer to that question would haunt Mrs. Carter for years to come, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how a dedicated teacher ended up broken and sobbing in a school nurse's office, we need to go back. Back to where it all began. Back to the first day Emily walked into her classroom and changed everything. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy educational stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. It was a Tuesday morning in September when Emily first appeared in Mrs. Carter's second-grade classroom. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting golden rectangles across the worn carpet and mismatched desks. 23 children chattered and laughed, their voices creating the familiar symphony of childhood that Mrs. Carter had come to love over her 15 years of teaching. She stood at the front of the room, attendance sheet in hand, calling out names with practiced efficiency. "Emily Richardson," she called, scanning the room. A small hand rose timidly from the back corner. Mrs. Carter's eyes landed on a petite girl with dark brown hair, pulled into two neat braids. Emily's face was pale, almost porcelain, with large hazel eyes that seemed too old for her 7 years. She wore a simple purple sweater despite the early autumn warmth, and her jeans looked freshly pressed. Everything about her appearance suggested careful attention, but there was something in her posture that made Mrs. Carter pause. Emily stood beside her desk rather than sitting in it. "Good morning, Emily," Mrs. Carter said warmly. "Welcome to our class. You can take your seat, sweetheart." Emily's eyes widened slightly, and her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. She remained standing, her small hands gripping the edge of her desk so tightly her knuckles turned white. Mrs. Carter smiled, assuming the girl was simply nervous on her first day. New students often needed time to adjust. "It's okay, honey. We're all friends here. Go ahead and sit down so we can start our morning lesson." I'd rather stand, Mrs. Carter," Emily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The other children began to notice. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the classroom like wind through grass. Mrs. Carter felt the dynamic shifting, felt the potential for disruption, but she kept her smile in place. "Pick your battles," she reminded herself. It was only the first day. "All right, Emily." "You can stand for now," she said, making a mental note to address it later. The morning proceeded without incident. Emily participated when called upon, her answers thoughtful and articulate, but she never once sat down. During reading time, she stood at her desk, book in hand. During math, she stood while working through problems on her worksheet. When the other children shifted and squirmed in their seats, as children do, Emily remained perfectly still, standing like a small statue. At lunchtime, Mrs. Carter watched as Emily carefully carried her lunch tray to a table and then remained standing while she ate. The other children gave her curious looks, some pointing and giggling, but Emily seemed to shrink into herself, eating quickly with her eyes down. "Everything okay, Emily?" Mrs. Carter asked, approaching the table. Emily looked up, startled. "Yes, ma'am. You know, it's much more comfortable to sit while you eat." "I'm fine standing, Mrs. Carter." "Really?" There was something in Emily's voice, a thread of desperation woven through the politeness that made Mrs. Carter's teacher instincts prick up. "Are you feeling all right? Does anything hurt?" "No, ma'am. I just prefer to stand." Mrs. Carter studied the girl's face, searching for signs of illness or distress, but Emily's expression remained carefully neutral. Too neutral, perhaps, for a 7-year-old. The afternoon brought more of the same. During art class, Emily stood at the craft table while the others sat on their stools. During story time, when Mrs. Carter gathered the children on the colorful reading rug, Emily lingered at the edge, standing while everyone else sat cross-legged on the floor. "Emily, come join us," Mrs. Carter encouraged, patting the empty space on the rug. Emily shook her head. "I can hear fine from here, Mrs. Carter." "I know, sweetheart, but we sit together during story time. It's part of our classroom community." Emily's face crumpled slightly, and for a moment Mrs. Carter thought she might cry. "Please," Emily whispered, "please don't make me sit." The words hung in the air, strange and unsettling. The other children had grown quiet, sensing the tension. Mrs. Carter felt torn between maintaining classroom order and pushing a child who was clearly distressed. She made a decision. "All right, Emily. You can stand today, but we'll need to talk about this tomorrow." Relief flooded Emily's face, so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter." That evening, after the children had gone home and the classroom had grown quiet, Mrs. Carter sat at her desk and stared at Emily's student file. It was thin, containing only the basic enrollment forms and transfer records from her previous school. No medical alerts, no behavioral notes, no red flags, just a standard file for what should have been a standard student. But there was nothing standard about a child who refused to sit down. Mrs. Carter pulled out her phone and composed an email to Emily's mother, keeping her tone light and concerned rather than accusatory. She explained the situation and asked if there was anything she should know, any reason Emily might be uncomfortable sitting. She hit send and tried to push the nagging worry from her mind. The next morning, Emily arrived early. Mrs. Carter watched her enter the classroom, noting the way she moved with careful, measured steps. The purple sweater had been replaced with a long-sleeved green shirt, again inappropriate for the weather, and Emily's face had the same pale, pinched quality as the day before. "Good morning, Emily," Mrs. Carter said cheerfully. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter. Did you have a good evening?" "Yes, ma'am." "Emily, I wanted to talk to you about the sitting situation." Emily's entire body tensed. Her hands, which had been hanging loosely at her sides, curled into small fists. "Please, Mrs. Carter, please don't make me sit down." "Sweetheart, I'm not trying to punish you. I just need to understand. Is there a reason you don't want to sit? Does something hurt?" "No, ma'am." "Are the chairs uncomfortable?" "No." "Ma'am?" "Then can you help me understand?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with visible effort. "I just can't. I'm sorry, I just can't." Mrs. Carter crouched down to Emily's eye level, her heart aching at the obvious distress radiating from this small child. "Okay, honey, I'm not going to force you, but I'm here if you need to talk about anything, all right? Anything at all." Emily nodded but said nothing more. As the other children filed in and the day began, Mrs. Carter found herself watching Emily with increasing concern. The girl participated in lessons, completed her work, and interacted politely with her classmates. But she never relaxed. Her shoulders remained tight, her movements careful and controlled, and she never, ever sat down. By mid-morning, the other children had begun to comment more openly. "Why does Emily always stand?" asked Marcus, a boisterous boy who sat in the front row. "Yeah, it's weird," added Sarah, twirling a blonde pigtail around her finger. "Is she scared of chairs?" Laughter rippled through the classroom. Emily's face flushed deep red, and she stared down at her desk. "That's enough," Mrs. Carter said firmly. "Everyone learns differently, and we respect each other's differences in this classroom. Emily can stand if she needs to." But the damage was done. Emily had been marked as different, and children could be cruel in their observations. Throughout the day, Mrs. Carter caught whispers and giggles directed at Emily. She saw the way Emily tried to make herself smaller, hunching her shoulders and keeping her eyes down. At recess, Mrs. Carter watched from the window as Emily stood alone near the fence while the other children played. She didn't run or climb or swing. She just stood, watching, her arms wrapped around herself. Mrs. Carter's phone buzzed, an email from Emily's mother. "Thank you for reaching out. Emily has always been a bit particular. She's going through a phase. Please just encourage her to participate like the other children. She needs to learn to follow rules. Best, Jennifer Richardson." Mrs. Carter read the message 3 times, her frown deepening with each pass. A phase. This didn't feel like a phase. This felt like something deeper, something darker. The dismissive tone of the email troubled her almost as much as Emily's behavior. The following days blurred together in a pattern that became increasingly concerning. Emily arrived each morning in long sleeves, regardless of the weather. The other second graders wore t-shirts and shorts as September's warmth lingered, but Emily remained covered, her clothes always neat and pressed, but seasonally inappropriate. And she never sat down. Mrs. Carter tried everything she could think of. She brought in a different chair, thinking perhaps the hard plastic seats were uncomfortable. Emily thanked her politely but remained standing. She offered a cushion, suggesting it might make sitting more pleasant. Emily declined with that same too polite voice that had become her trademark. She even rearranged the classroom, giving Emily a desk near the back where she could stand without drawing as much attention. Nothing changed. On Friday of that first week, Mrs. Carter decided to try a different approach. She'd been teaching long enough to know that sometimes children responded better to incentives than direct confrontation. "Class," she announced after lunch, "I have a special treat today. Everyone who participates fully in our afternoon activities gets to choose a prize from the treasure box." 23 faces lit up with excitement. The treasure box was legendary in Mrs. Carter's classroom, filled with small toys, stickers, and candy that children coveted. Emily's expression remained neutral, but Mrs. Carter saw a flicker of interest in those 2 old eyes. "Now, full participation means following all classroom rules," Mrs. Carter continued, her gaze lingering on Emily. "That includes sitting in our seats during lesson time." Emily's face fell. The other children began whispering again, their voices rising in a familiar chorus of speculation and mockery. Mrs. Carter quieted them with a look, but the damage had been done. Emily knew this was directed at her. As the afternoon lessons began, Mrs. Carter taught a science lesson about the life cycle of butterflies. The children sat at their desks, dutifully taking notes and coloring worksheets, all except Emily, who stood at her desk, her pencil moving mechanically across the page. "Emily," Mrs. Carter said gently, "wouldn't you like to earn a prize from the treasure box?" "Yes, ma'am," Emily whispered, not looking up. "Then please take your seat, sweetheart." Emily's hand stopped moving. The pencil trembled in her small fingers. "I can't, Mrs. Carter." "Of course you can. It's easy. Just sit down." "Please don't make me." Emily's voice cracked, and tears began sliding down her cheeks. "Please, please don't make me sit down." The classroom had gone silent. 22 children watched with wide eyes as Emily began to cry in earnest, her small body shaking with the force of her sobs. Mrs. Carter felt a stab of guilt pierce through her frustration. This wasn't defiance. This was terror. "It's all right, Emily," she said quickly, moving toward the girl. "You don't have to sit. It's okay." But Emily was already backing away, her eyes wild and desperate. "I'm sorry," she gasped between sobs. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Emily, honey, calm down. No one's angry with you. I can't sit down. I just can't. Please don't make me. Please. Mrs. Carter reached out to comfort the girl, but Emily flinched away so violently that she stumbled backward into her desk. The crash echoed through the silent classroom. Emily's breathing had become rapid and shallow, her face pale as paper. Sarah, go get Nurse Linda. Quickly, Mrs. Carter instructed, her teacher voice steady even as her heart raced. She turned back to Emily, keeping her distance this time. Emily, I need you to breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Can you do that? Emily tried, but her breaths came in ragged gasps. She was hyperventilating, her small body trembling like a leaf in a storm. The other children watched in stunned silence, their earlier mockery forgotten in the face of genuine distress. Nurse Linda arrived within minutes, her efficient presence immediately calming. What happened? She asked Mrs. Carter in a low voice. I asked her to sit down. She had a panic attack. Linda's eyebrows rose, but she said nothing. She approached Emily slowly, speaking in a soft, soothing tone. Hi, Emily. I'm Nurse Linda. I'm going to help you feel better, okay? Can you look at me? Emily's eyes, still streaming with tears, focused on Linda's face. Good. Now, let's breathe together. Watch me. Linda took an exaggerated breath in, held it, then released it slowly. Your turn. It took several minutes, but eventually Emily's breathing began to normalize. The other children had been dismissed to the library with the teaching assistant, leaving just Mrs. Carter, Linda, and Emily in the classroom. Emily, can you tell me what's wrong? Linda asked gently. Are you hurt? Emily shook her head violently. I'm fine, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You're not in trouble, sweetheart. We're just worried about you. Can you tell us why you don't want to sit down? I just don't want to, Emily whispered. Please, I just don't want to. Linda looked at Mrs. Carter, and an unspoken communication passed between them. Something was very wrong here, but the child wasn't going to tell them voluntarily. All right, Emily, Linda said. Why don't you come with me to my office? We can call your mom to come pick you up early. You've had a rough day. Fresh panic flashed across Emily's face. No, please don't call my mom. I'm fine. I can stay. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. Emily, you are being good, Mrs. Carter said firmly. This isn't about being good or bad. We're just concerned about you. I'm fine, Emily repeated, her voice taking on a desperate edge. Really, I'm fine. I just don't like sitting. That's all. Lots of people don't like sitting. It's not a big deal. But it was a big deal. Both adults knew it, and beneath her protests, Emily knew it too. They eventually allowed Emily to return to class, though Linda pulled Mrs. Carter aside first. That's not normal behavior, she said quietly. That's trauma response. That child is terrified of something. I know, Mrs. Carter replied. I've emailed the mother, but she brushed it off. Said Emily is just going through a phase. That's not a phase, that's fear. Linda crossed her arms, her expression troubled. Keep an eye on her. Document everything. If this continues, we may need to involve the counselor. Mrs. Carter nodded, but a heavy dread had settled in her stomach. She'd been teaching long enough to recognize the signs of a child in distress. She'd seen abuse before, seen neglect, seen the 1,000 ways children could be hurt by the adults who were supposed to protect them. But she'd never seen anything quite like this. The weekend came and went. Mrs. Carter found herself thinking about Emily at odd moments, worry gnawing at her. She drafted another email to Emily's mother, this one more direct, expressing serious concerns about Emily's emotional state. She sent it Saturday evening and checked her inbox obsessively all day Sunday. No response came. Monday morning arrived with overcast skies that matched Mrs. Carter's mood. She arrived at school early, hoping to catch Emily before the other students arrived. She wanted to talk to the girl one-on-one, without the pressure of audience and judgment. Emily appeared in the doorway at 7:45, 15 minutes before the morning bell. She wore a long-sleeved yellow sweater this time, and Mrs. Carter noticed how carefully she moved, as if each step required conscious thought. "Good morning, Emily," Mrs. Carter said warmly. "You're here early." "Good morning, Mrs. Carter." Emily's voice was soft, almost mechanical. "Listen, sweetheart, I want to apologize for Friday. I shouldn't have pushed you like that. I was wrong." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "You weren't wrong, Mrs. Carter. I should follow the rules. I know I should." "Emily, some rules can be flexible. If you need to stand, you can stand. I mean that." "Thank you, Mrs. Carter." Mrs. Carter moved closer, lowering herself to Emily's level. "But I am worried about you. Can you tell me why you don't want to sit? You can trust me." For a moment, Emily's carefully constructed mask slipped. Mrs. Carter saw pain flash across the girl's face, raw and terrible. Then it was gone, replaced by that neutral expression that was becoming all too familiar. "I just prefer standing," Emily said. "That's all. Is everything okay at home?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you're not hurt or sick?" "No, ma'am." Mrs. Carter wanted to push, wanted to demand the truth, but she could see Emily shutting down. The girl's shoulders had drawn up, her body language screaming that this conversation was over. "Okay, Emily. But I'm here whenever you want to talk, about anything." "Thank you, Mrs. Carter." The day proceeded much like the previous week. Emily stood through every lesson, every activity, every moment. The other children had mostly stopped commenting, having grown used to Emily's strange behavior, though Mrs. Carter still caught occasional whispers and stares. Emily participated in lessons, her work consistently good, but she remained distant, never quite connecting with her classmates. During recess, Mrs. Carter watched Emily stand alone near the playground fence again. A group of girls approached her, and for a moment, Mrs. Carter hoped they were reaching out in friendship. But then she saw Emily shake her head at whatever they'd said, and the girls walked away, leaving Emily alone once more. At lunch, Mrs. Carter tried a new approach. She sat down at Emily's table, where the girl stood eating her sandwich. "Mind if I join you?" Mrs. Carter asked. "Of course not, Mrs. Carter." They ate in silence for a moment. Mrs. Carter watched Emily carefully, noting the way she winced slightly when she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Your feet must get tired," Mrs. Carter observed casually. "Standing all day." "I'm used to it," Emily replied. "How long have you preferred standing?" Emily's hand paused halfway to her mouth. "A while. Since before you came to our school." "Yes, ma'am." "Did something happen that made you start standing instead of sitting?" Emily set down her sandwich, her appetite apparently gone. "I should get back to class," she said quietly. "Lunch isn't over yet, honey." "I'm not hungry anymore." Emily's voice had taken on that desperate edge again, the one that signaled she was close to tears. "May I please be excused?" Mrs. Carter watched Emily hurry away, her small frame rigid with tension. The untouched half of her sandwich sat abandoned on the tray. Something was deeply wrong, and Mrs. Carter's frustration was mounting alongside her concern. Every attempt to reach the child was met with polite deflection or outright panic. It was like trying to grasp smoke. That afternoon, Mrs. Carter received a response to her weekend email. Jennifer Richardson's message was brief and sharp. "Mrs. Carter, I appreciate your concern, but you're overreacting. Emily is fine. She's always been dramatic and seeks attention. Please stop coddling her and treat her like any other student. If she won't sit, give her detention. She needs discipline, not sympathy. Jennifer Richardson. Mrs. Carter read the email 3 times, her anger building with each pass. Dramatic? Attention-seeking? This woman clearly didn't understand her own daughter, or worse, didn't want to. The dismissive tone, the suggestion of punishment for behavior that was obviously rooted in fear, it all added up to a picture that Mrs. Carter didn't like at all. She forwarded the email to the school counselor, Mark Chen, with a note explaining the situation. Within an hour, Mark appeared at her classroom door. "Can we talk?" he asked. They met during Mrs. Carter's planning period, sitting in the small guidance office that smelled of old coffee and lavender air freshener. Mark had printed out the email chain and Emily's sparse student file. "Tell me everything," he said. Mrs. Carter recounted the past 2 weeks in detail, from Emily's first day to the panic attack to this morning's conversation. Mark listened intently, taking notes, his expression growing more troubled as the story unfolded. "And the mother is completely dismissive?" he asked. "Completely. She thinks I'm coddling Emily, suggested detention as punishment." Mark shook his head. "That's concerning, very concerning. I'd like to speak with Emily myself, if that's all right." "Please do. Maybe she'll open up to you." The next morning, Mark pulled Emily from class for what he described as a friendly chat to help new students adjust. Mrs. Carter watched them go, hoping against hope that Emily would finally tell someone what was wrong. 45 minutes later, Mark returned Emily to the classroom. The girl's eyes were red-rimmed, and she moved even more carefully than usual. Mark caught Mrs. Carter's eye and gave a subtle shake of his head. No progress. At lunch, Mark found Mrs. Carter in the teacher's lounge. "She's terrified," he said without preamble. "I've never seen a child so scared, but she won't say why. Every time I got close to the real issue, she shut down completely. What do we do? I'm going to call the mother and request a meeting. Face to face. Sometimes parents reveal more in person than they do over email. Do you think it's abuse?" Mark hesitated. "I think something is happening in that house that's causing extreme distress to that child. Whether it meets the legal definition of abuse, I can't say yet. But my gut tells me something is very wrong." The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Mrs. Carter spent the intervening days watching Emily with increasing anxiety. The girl had grown even more withdrawn, barely speaking unless directly addressed. Her work remained good, her behavior impeccable, but there was a hollowness to her that broke Mrs. Carter's heart. On Wednesday, during art class, something happened that shifted everything. The children were working on a painting project, sitting at long tables covered with newspaper. Emily stood at the end of one table, her brush moving across her paper in careful strokes. Mrs. Carter was helping Marcus mix colors when she heard a commotion from Emily's table. "Emily, watch out!" Sarah shouted. Mrs. Carter turned just in time to see Emily stumble backward, her foot catching on a chair leg. The girl's arms windmilled as she fought for balance, and then she was falling backward towards the hard tile floor. Emily's scream pierced the air, a sound of pure terror that froze everyone in place. She hit the ground hard, landing squarely on her back. The impact drove the air from her lungs with an audible whoosh. But it was what happened next that changed everything. Emily began screaming in a way that had nothing to do with the fall itself. These weren't cries of pain from bumps or bruises. These were screams of agony, raw and primal, the kind of sounds that spoke to something much worse than a simple tumble. Mrs. Carter rushed to Emily's side, her heart hammering. "Emily, Emily, where does it hurt?" Emily was sobbing, gasping, her small body convulsing with pain and panic. "My back," she choked out. "Oh God, my back, my back, my back." "Don't move, sweetheart. Just stay still." Mrs. Carter looked up at her teaching assistant. "Call Nurse Linda, now." The other children had gathered around, their faces pale and frightened. Some were crying themselves, upset by Emily's obvious distress. "Everyone back to your seats," Mrs. Carter commanded, her voice brooking no argument. "Jessica, take everyone to the library. Story time. Now." The assistant herded the children out while Mrs. Carter knelt beside Emily. The girl was still crying, still gasping, her hands pressed to the floor on either side of her body as if afraid to move. "Emily, I need to see where you're hurt. Can I lift your shirt?" "No." Emily's eyes flew open, wild with panic. "No, please, don't look. Don't look. Please don't look." "Sweetheart, I need to see if you're bleeding or broken something." I'm fine. Just help me up. Please, just help me up." But Emily couldn't stand. When she tried to push herself up, her face contorted in agony and she collapsed back down, fresh sobs tearing from her throat. Nurse Linda arrived at a run, her medical bag bouncing against her hip. She took one look at the situation and immediately knelt beside Emily. "Emily, honey, I'm going to help you, okay? But I need to check your back. You might have hurt your spine in the fall." "No," Emily whimpered. "Please, no, don't look. You can't look." Linda met Mrs. Carter's eyes over Emily's small form. Something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding that they were about to uncover something terrible. "Emily, I'm a nurse. It's my job to make sure you're not seriously injured. I'm going to be very gentle, I promise." Linda's voice was calm but firm. "Mrs. Carter, can you hold her hand?" Mrs. Carter took Emily's small, cold hand in hers. The girl gripped back with surprising strength, her fingers digging in desperately. "It's okay, Emily," Mrs. Carter whispered. "We're here. We're going to help you." Linda began to carefully lift the back of Emily's yellow sweater. Emily was still crying, still begging them not to look, but she'd stopped fighting. It was as if she knew the secret was finally going to come out, and part of her was almost relieved. The sweater came up slowly, revealing the white undershirt beneath. Linda lifted that too, and both adults froze at what they saw. Emily's back was a landscape of horror, dark purple bruises, some fresh and angry, others faded to sickly yellow and green, covered her skin from shoulder blades to lower back. But it was worse than just bruises. There were marks, deliberate patterns that spoke of repeated trauma, welts that looked like they'd come from something thin and flexible, and worst of all, taped to Emily's skin with medical adhesive, were what looked like small, flat pieces of hard plastic or wood, positioned right where her back would make contact with the chair. Mrs. Carter felt her stomach lurch. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she had to fight the urge to be sick, right there on the classroom floor. Linda's face had gone pale, her professional composure cracking as she took in the full extent of what Emily had been hiding. "Oh, sweetheart," Linda breathed. "Oh, Emily." Emily was sobbing harder now, but there was a quality to her cries that was almost like relief, as if a terrible weight had finally been lifted. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm so sorry. I tried to hide it. I tried so hard." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Mrs. Carter said, tears streaming down her own face now. "Nothing at all. This isn't your fault, baby. This isn't your fault." Linda was already on her phone, her voice low and urgent as she spoke to someone on the other end. Mrs. Carter caught fragments of the conversation. "Suspected abuse. Immediate. Police and CPS. Don't let anyone take her." Mrs. Carter squeezed Emily's hand. "Emily, who did this to you? Who hurt you?" Emily's eyes met hers, and the pain in them was far older than 7 years. "My brother," she whispered. "My brother Jake." "Why, honey? Why would he do this?" Fresh sobs racked Emily's small body. "He said I needed to toughen up. He said pain makes you strong. He makes me do things, makes me practice with the hard things under my clothes. He said if I could learn to sit through pain, I could do anything. He said he was helping me." Emily's voice broke completely. But it hurts so much. It hurts all the time. I just wanted it to stop hurting. Mrs. Carter was openly crying now, her professional composure completely shattered. She wanted to gather this broken child into her arms, to protect her, to erase every moment of pain she'd endured. But she couldn't move Emily, couldn't risk making the injuries worse. How long, Emily? How long has this been happening? Since summer, since June. Emily's voice was barely audible. He started with small things, just hard things to sit on, but then it got worse. He started hitting me too, to make bruises so sitting would hurt more. He said I had to learn. He said I was weak and he was making me strong. Linda knelt back down, having finished her call. Emily, the ambulance is coming. They're going to take you to the hospital to make sure nothing is broken and to treat your injuries. And I've called some people who are going to help keep you safe, okay? No one is going to hurt you anymore. What about Jake? Emily asked, fear sharp in her voice. What about my brother? He said if I told anyone, he'd make it worse. He said no one would believe me anyway. Your brother is not going to hurt you again, Linda said firmly. I promise you that. Within minutes, the classroom had become a flurry of activity. The principal arrived, then the school resource officer. An ambulance pulled up to the front entrance. Through it all, Mrs. Carter stayed by Emily's side, holding her hand, whispering reassurances that she wasn't sure she believed herself. How had she missed this? How had 2 weeks passed with this child suffering in silence, literally unable to sit down because of the torture she was enduring at home? And no one had figured it out. The guilt was crushing, pressing down on Mrs. Carter's chest until she could barely breathe. The paramedics arrived with a stretcher and gentle hands. They assessed Emily carefully, their faces grim as they documented her injuries. One of them, a kind-faced woman named Rosa, spoke to Emily in soothing Spanish-accented English while they prepared to transport her. You're very brave, Rosa told Emily as they carefully positioned her on her side on the stretcher. Very, very brave. Mrs. Carter followed them to the ambulance, still holding Emily's hand. Can I come with her? She asked. Are you family? Rosa asked. No, but I'm her teacher. I don't want her to be alone. Rosa glanced at her partner, then nodded. Okay. You can ride with us. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and antiseptic smells. Emily was whisked away for x-rays and examination, while Mrs. Carter sat in the waiting room, her hands still trembling. She tried to call Emily's mother 3 times, but each call went to voicemail. She left increasingly urgent messages, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. A social worker appeared within the hour, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her name was Patricia Gomez, and she sat down next to Mrs. Carter with a heavy sigh. You're the teacher? She asked. Yes, Mrs. Carter, 2nd grade. Tell me everything. So Mrs. Carter told the story again, from beginning to end. Patricia took notes, asking pointed questions, her expression growing darker as the details emerged. And the mother has been dismissive of your concerns. Completely. She called Emily dramatic and attention-seeking, suggested I give her detention for not sitting. Patricia's jaw tightened. We see this sometimes. Parents in denial, or worse, complicit in the abuse. I've contacted the police. They're sending detectives to the family home now. What about Emily? What happens to her? She won't be going home. Not today, not until we've completed a full investigation. She'll be placed in emergency foster care. Patricia paused, studying Mrs. Carter's face. You did the right thing. You saved that child. But Mrs. Carter didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a failure. I should have seen it sooner. 2 weeks. She suffered for 2 weeks while I was right there. You couldn't have known. Children hide abuse remarkably well, especially when they've been threatened. Patricia leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Listen to me. That little girl stood through every class, every day, in obvious discomfort, because she was too terrified to let anyone see what was under her clothes. That takes incredible strength and fear. You didn't fail her. You noticed when it mattered. A doctor appeared in the waiting room, still in his scrubs. Are you here for Emily Richardson? Both women stood. How is she? Mrs. Carter asked. Physically, she'll recover. No broken bones, thankfully, though the soft tissue damage is extensive. The bruising is severe and some of the welts show signs of infection. We're starting her on antibiotics and pain medication. The doctor's expression darkened. But what concerns me more is what she told the pediatric psychiatrist. This wasn't just physical abuse, it was systematic torture disguised as training. Mrs. Carter felt the room spin slightly. Training for what? According to Emily, her older brother believed he was preparing her for some kind of endurance challenge. He'd been watching videos online about pain tolerance and military training. He decided his little sister needed to be toughened up. He started by making her sit on hard objects for increasingly long periods. When that wasn't enough, he began creating injuries intentionally, then forcing her to sit on them to build up her pain threshold. Patricia swore quietly. How old is this brother? 16, according to Emily, old enough to know exactly what he was doing. Mrs. Carter sank back into her chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. A 16-year-old doing this to his 7-year-old sister. The cruelty was incomprehensible. Can I see her? She asked weakly. The doctor nodded. She's been asking for you. Room 312. Emily looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, surrounded by white sheets and beeping machines. Her eyes were closed, but they fluttered open when Mrs. Carter entered. A weak smile crossed her face. Mrs. Carter, she whispered. Hi, sweetheart. Mrs. Carter pulled a chair close to the bed and took Emily's hand again. How are you feeling? Sleepy. They gave me medicine. It doesn't hurt as much now. That's good. That's very good. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Emily's eyes filled with tears again. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I didn't tell the truth. Oh, honey, you have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. You were scared, and that's completely understandable. Jake said no one would believe me. He said teachers always think kids are lying. Emily's voice was thick with exhaustion and medication. He said if I told, they'd take me away from Mom, and she'd hate me forever. Your brother was wrong, so very wrong, and you're going to be safe now. I promise you that. Where will I go? Emily's voice was small and frightened. Patricia said I can't go home. Mrs. Carter's heart broke all over again. You'll stay with a nice family who will take care of you while everyone figures out the best plan. But you won't have to see your brother. He can't hurt you anymore. What about Mom? Did she know? Did she know what Jake was doing? It was the question Mrs. Carter had been dreading. I don't know, sweetheart. The police are talking to her now. Emily's eyes drifted closed again. She didn't know, she murmured. She works a lot. She's always tired. Jake was supposed to watch me, but he said it was our secret. He said I'd ruin everything if I told. Mrs. Carter stayed until Emily fell asleep, then made her way back to the waiting room. Patricia was there, talking on her phone. When she saw Mrs. Carter, she ended the call. The police have been to the house, she said. The mother claims she had no idea what was happening. The brother denies everything, says Emily is making it up for attention. But the injuries, they arrested him. The physical evidence is overwhelming. But he's maintaining his innocence, and the mother is defending him. Patricia's expression was weary. It's not uncommon. Families fracture along predictable lines in cases like this. Over the next several days, the full story emerged piece by piece. Detectives interviewed Emily multiple times, always with Patricia present. They spoke to neighbors, to Emily's previous teachers, to anyone who might have seen signs of what was happening. Jake Richardson, it turned out, had been downloading military training videos and content about pain tolerance for months. His internet history revealed searches for how to build pain resistance, military torture resistance training, and making someone tough. He'd apparently convinced himself that he was helping his sister, preparing her for a harsh world by systematically torturing her. Emily's mother, Jennifer, had indeed been working long hours at 2 jobs to support the family after her divorce. She'd left Jake, who she described as responsible and mature, in charge of Emily after school. She claimed to have never noticed the bruises because Emily was always dressed by the time Jennifer saw her in the mornings, and Emily had become adept at changing clothes in private. Whether this was willful ignorance or genuine blindness was debated, but ultimately Child Protective Services determined that Jennifer had been negligent in her supervision. Emily would not be returning to her care, at least not immediately. Mrs. Carter visited Emily twice more in the hospital before the girl was released to foster care. Each visit was bittersweet. Emily seemed lighter somehow, as if the terrible secret had been weighing her down, and its revelation, however traumatic, had brought relief. But there was also a sadness in her eyes, a loss of innocence that could never be recovered. "Will I come back to your class?" Emily asked during the last hospital visit. "I don't know yet, honey. It depends on where your foster placement is. But wherever you are, whatever school you're in, I'll come visit you if you want me to. And you can always call me." "I'd like that," Emily said softly. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for seeing." It was those words that finally broke Mrs. Carter completely. She excused herself to the bathroom and sobbed, great heaving cries that she muffled in paper towels. "Thank you for seeing," as if it had been some great accomplishment when in reality she'd been blind for far too long. The following weeks brought a media storm. Local news picked up the story, and suddenly Mrs. Carter found herself thrust into the spotlight as the teacher who had uncovered systematic child abuse. She hated every second of it. She wasn't a hero. She was just someone who had finally paid attention. Jake Richardson was charged as an adult with multiple counts of child abuse and torture. His trial was scheduled for 6 months out. Jennifer Richardson lost custody of Emily and was required to complete parenting classes and supervised visitation before any reunification could be considered. Emily was placed with a foster family in a neighboring district. They were kind people, the Johnsons, with grown children of their own, and experience fostering traumatized kids. Mrs. Carter met them once when Emily asked to see her 2 weeks after the hospital discharge. They met at a park, neutral territory. Emily was wearing shorts for the first time, her legs thin and pale in the autumn sunshine. She still moved carefully, but there was something different about her posture. She wasn't hunched anymore, wasn't trying to make herself invisible. "Hi, Mrs. Carter," Emily said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. They sat on a bench, Mrs. Johnson a discreet distance away. Emily talked about her new school, her new teacher, her therapy sessions. She talked about learning to sit again, how strange it felt at first, how sometimes she still caught herself standing without thinking about it. "But I'm getting better," Emily said. "Dr. Martinez says I'm making good progress. And the Johnsons are really nice. They have a cat named Mittens." Mrs. Carter listened, her heart swelling with relief and lingering sorrow. "I'm so glad, sweetheart. I'm so glad you're healing." "I wanted to thank you," Emily said seriously. "Really thank you. I know I said it before, but I mean it. You saved my life, Mrs. Carter. If you hadn't kept asking, if you hadn't noticed, I don't know how much longer I could have lasted." "Oh, Emily, Mrs. Carter pulled the girl into a gentle hug, mindful of her still healing back. "You saved yourself by being brave enough to survive. I just did what any teacher should do." They talked for another hour, and when it was time to go, Emily hugged Mrs. Carter one more time. "Will you come visit again?" she asked. "As often as you want me to," Mrs. Carter promised. 6 months passed. Emily continued therapy and slowly rebuilt her sense of safety in the world. Mrs. Carter visited once a month, watching with quiet joy as the hollow-eyed child she'd first met transformed into someone brighter, more present. Emily laughed now. She played. She sat without fear. Jake Richardson was convicted on all counts and sentenced to juvenile detention until his 21st birthday, followed by probation. The judge's words during sentencing echoed in Mrs. Carter's mind. "You systematically tortured a child under the guise of helping her. There is no greater betrayal than using love as a weapon." Jennifer Richardson completed her required classes and began supervised visits with Emily. The relationship was fragile, complicated by Emily's lingering hurt that her mother hadn't noticed, hadn't protected her. But they were trying, and that was something. Mrs. Carter returned to her classroom, but she was changed. She looked at her students differently now, watched for the signs she'd nearly missed with Emily. She trained other teachers on recognizing abuse, spoke at district meetings about the importance of trusting instinct over compliance. "Sometimes," she told a room full of educators, "the most obedient child is the one suffering most. Sometimes silence isn't golden. Sometimes it's a scream no one's hearing." On a warm spring day, nearly 8 months after that terrible discovery in her classroom, Mrs. Carter received a package in the mail. Inside was a drawing, clearly done by a child's hand. It showed 2 figures, a small girl sitting in a chair, smiling, and a tall woman standing beside her with a protective hand on her shoulder. At the bottom, in careful second-grade handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for teaching me it's okay to sit down. Love, Emily." Mrs. Carter hung the drawing on her refrigerator, where she saw it every morning. It reminded her why she taught, why she cared, why she refused to look away even when looking was painful. Emily's story could have ended in tragedy. It could have ended with a child so broken she never recovered. But it didn't because someone finally paid attention. Because someone finally saw past the polite compliance to the desperate plea underneath. Not every story ends with rescue. Not every child gets a second chance. But Emily did, and Mrs. Carter carried that knowledge like a torch, illuminating the darkness where other children might be hiding their pain. The lesson was simple but profound. Listen to what children aren't saying. Watch for the behavior that doesn't make sense. Trust the instinct that whispers something is wrong, and never ever assume that a quiet, compliant child is simply well-behaved. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest cries for help. Sometimes a child who won't sit down is a child who can't. And sometimes the difference between tragedy and healing is simply someone who refuses to look away. Emily had begged not to sit, and when someone finally discovered why, everything changed, not just for Emily, but for everyone who heard her story and resolved to pay closer attention to the children in their own lives. Because every child deserves to feel safe. Every child deserves protection, and every child deserves at least one adult who will see them, really see them, and refuse to stop asking questions until the truth comes out. That's the power of paying attention. That's the responsibility of every adult in a child's life. And that's why Mrs. Carter would never stop watching, never stop listening, never stop believing that sometimes the smallest signs point to the biggest tragedies. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the children in your own life, we encourage you to share it with others. Hit that like button, Subscribe to our channel for more important stories like this one, and leave a comment telling us your thoughts. Sometimes awareness is the first step toward protection. Sometimes a story can save a life. And if you're a teacher, a parent, a coach, or anyone who works with children, remember Emily. Remember that compliance isn't always cooperation. Remember that silence isn't always consent. Remember to look deeper, ask questions, and trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Because somewhere right now, there's another child standing when they should be sitting, hiding pain behind politeness, waiting for someone to notice. Be the person who notices. Be the person who asks. Be the person who refuses to look away. Thank you for watching, and remember, every child's story matters.